My son's French fiancée called me an ugly cow in her native language, thinking I couldn't understand. I smiled politely and served her more wine. 3 hours later, I casually mentioned to her parents that immigration would be very interested in our conversation. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me back up and tell you how I discovered that my future daughter-in-law was nothing more than a gold-digging fraud with a charming accent. It started on a crisp October evening in Austin. David, my 35-year-old son, had finally brought home the mysterious Frenchwoman he'd been dating for 6 months. Camille Dubois was everything I'd expected from his breathless descriptions. Petite, elegant, with that effortless style that French women seem to master in the womb. Her English was impeccable, tinged with just enough accent to be charming rather than difficult. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, taking my hands in both of hers. "David has told me so much about you. I'm so excited to finally meet the woman who raised such a wonderful man." I warmed to her immediately. After David's string of vapid girlfriends who couldn't be bothered to remember my name, Camille's genuine interest in our family history felt like a blessing. She asked thoughtful questions about the photos on my mantelpiece, complimented my cooking with what seemed like sincere appreciation, and even helped clear the table without being asked. David beamed throughout dinner, clearly smitten. "Camille speaks 5 languages fluently," he boasted, squeezing her hand. "She's been teaching me French, though I'm hopeless at it." "Oh, you're being modest," Camille laughed, her eyes twinkling. "His pronunciation is, how do you say, endearing." We all laughed, and I found myself thinking that David had finally found someone worthy of him, someone with substance, intelligence, and genuine warmth, someone who might actually stick around long enough for me to get attached to. That feeling lasted exactly 47 minutes. After dinner, David excused himself to take an important work call. I was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher when Camille's phone rang. She answered in rapid French, her voice carrying from the living room with the casual assumption that comes from believing you're speaking a private language. Here's the thing about assumptions. They can make you sloppy. I spent 4 years of my youth in Lyon, working as an au pair to pay for college. My French might be rusty, but it's far from dead, and what I heard in those next few minutes made my blood run cold. "Oui, maman. She seems harmless enough," Camille was saying. "Old, clearly desperate to keep her son happy. She'll be easy to manage once we're married." I froze, a dinner plate suspended halfway between the table and the dishwasher. The house is lovely, bigger than David described, and yes, there are definitely family assets to consider. She mentioned his father left them very comfortable. Her laugh was musical, cold. "Don't worry, I've already started working on the inheritance angle. Americans are so sentimental about family legacy." My hands began to shake, but I forced myself to keep moving, to keep the normal sounds of cleaning going while I listened to my future daughter-in-law dissect my family like specimens in a lab. David is perfect for this, naive, generous, and completely infatuated. The green card will be simple once we're married, and the divorce even simpler once I have what I need. 2 years maximum, then I'll be free to return to Paris with American citizenship and enough money to live exactly as I choose. The plate slipped from my numb fingers and shattered against the kitchen floor. "Mrs. Thompson, are you all right?" Camille appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of concern. Perfect performance, if I hadn't just heard her true colors in crystal-clear French. "Just clumsy," I managed, kneeling to collect the pieces. "These old hands aren't what they used to be." She hurried to help me, her movements graceful and considerate. "Please, let me do this. You shouldn't be cleaning up after hosting such a wonderful dinner." The irony was so thick I could taste it. This woman had just finished explaining to her mother how she planned to manipulate and eventually rob my son, and now she was helping me clean up broken dishes with the tenderness of an actual caring daughter-in-law. "I have much experience with cleaning," she said with a self-deprecating laugh. "I worked in hotels in Paris before meeting David. Very humbling work, but it taught me to appreciate when others make effort for me." Another lie, delivered with such sincerity that I almost believed it myself. Almost. David returned from his call, apologizing profusely. "Sorry about that. Crisis at the site, but it's handled now." He surveyed the scene of us cleaning up together, and his face lit up like Christmas morning. "Look at you two, Already acting like family, Camille stood gracefully, disposing of the broken porcelain. "Your mother is wonderful, chérie, so warm and welcoming. I feel very lucky." She was good, professionally good. Every gesture, every expression, every carefully chosen word was designed to reinforce the narrative she'd constructed. The grateful foreign girl, charmed by American family values and eager to belong. I found my voice somehow. "Well, aren't you sweet? David's right. You do seem like family already." We settled in the living room with coffee, and Camille regaled us with what I now knew were carefully crafted stories about her life in France. The struggling artist narrative, the difficult childhood that made her appreciate David's stability, the dreams of building a life in America with the right partner. Every word was calculated, designed to hit David's protective instincts and his American savior complex. And it was working beautifully. My son hung on every syllable, his eyes soft with the kind of love that makes smart men do incredibly stupid things. "Tell Mom about the visa situation," David prompted gently. "She might have some insights. She's always been good at navigating bureaucracy." Camille's eyes flickered almost imperceptibly, but her smile never wavered. "Oh, it's complicated, but not urgent. The tourist visa is good for several more months, and David has been helping me understand the process for more permanent arrangements." The pause was perfectly timed, allowing David to fill in the romantic implications without her having to lie outright. "Masterful. We're thinking about engagement soon," David said, reaching for her hand. "Once Camille's settled and comfortable with the idea of staying permanently." "How romantic," I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "When you know, I suppose." Camille ducked her head modestly. "I never expected to find someone like David. Sometimes the heart surprises us, non?" Oh, the heart had definitely been surprised tonight, just not in the way she meant. As the evening wound down and David walked Camille to her car, I stood at the window watching them embrace. She was saying something that made him laugh, probably spinning another beautiful lie about their future together. He looked so happy, so hopeful, so completely unaware that the woman in his arms saw him as nothing more than a stepping stone to American citizenship and whatever money she could extract from our family. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my late husband's study, surrounded by 40 years of financial documents and family records, trying to understand exactly what Camille thought she was targeting. Robert had been a careful man, methodical in his approach to security. Our assets weren't flashy, but they were substantial. The house alone was worth close to $800,000, sitting on 2 acres in one of Austin's most desirable neighborhoods. The investment portfolios, retirement accounts, and life insurance policies painted a picture of comfortable upper-middle-class wealth. Nothing extravagant, but certainly enough to tempt someone with Camille's apparent agenda. What chilled me most was how efficiently she'd assessed our situation. One dinner, and she'd already calculated inheritance angles and timeline strategies. This wasn't impulsive opportunism, this was professional predation. By dawn, I'd made 2 decisions. First, I would not tell David what I'd overheard. Not yet. He was so deeply infatuated that any accusation from me would only drive him closer to her, cast me as the jealous mother who couldn't accept her son's happiness. I'd seen enough Lifetime movies to know how that story ended. Second, I needed to know exactly who Camille Dubois really was. I started with the basics: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Her social media presence was polished but thin, mostly photos from the last 18 months. No deep history, no childhood friends or family members tagged in old posts. The few pictures from France were generic tourist shots that could have been taken by anyone. Her LinkedIn claimed she worked in hospitality management in Paris, but the company names were vague and there were no colleague connections or recommendations. For someone supposedly in her late 20s with a career in the hospitality industry, her professional network was remarkably sparse. I was deep in internet rabbit holes when my phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen and my heart clenched with guilt. How do you talk to your child when you know something that will devastate them but can't prove it yet? "Morning, Mom. Thanks again for last night. Camille couldn't stop talking about how wonderful you were." I bet she couldn't. "She's lovely, sweetheart. I can see why you're so taken with her." "I'm thinking about proposing soon," he said, his voice bright with excitement. Maybe Christmas? I know it's fast, but when it's right, it's right. Christmas. 2 months away. My stomach nodded. That's wonderful news, David. Have you thought about what kind of proposal? Where you might do it? As he chattered about his romantic plans, I was calculating timelines in my head. If they married quickly after the holidays, she'd have her green card application filed by spring. 2 years later, she'd be eligible for permanent residency. 2 years after that, full citizenship. Then, the divorce, carefully timed to maximize her take from community property. 4 years. She was planning to systematically destroy my son's life over 4 years. Mom, you still there? Sorry, darling. Just thinking about how happy this makes me. The lie came easier than I expected. Have you met her family yet? Her parents? Not in person, but we video chat with them sometimes. They live in Marseille. Her father's a retired teacher, her mother works in local government. Very traditional family, which is why she's being careful about the engagement timeline. They want to meet me properly first. Traditional family. If they truly existed, they were probably horrified by their daughter's immigration fraud scheme. Or maybe they were in on it, coaching her through her long-distance destruction of an American family. That sounds reasonable, I said carefully. Maybe you should visit them before proposing, really understand where she comes from. Actually, they're planning to visit us next month. Camille wanted them to meet you before we make anything official. She values family approval. Of course she did. Meet the Marks family, charm the parents, establish herself as the perfect future daughter-in-law, then spring the engagement and rush toward marriage before anyone had time to ask difficult questions. After David hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen, feeling the weight of impossible choices. I could hire a private investigator, but that felt like crossing a line that would damage my relationship with David regardless of what we found. I could confront Camille directly, but she was clearly skilled at manipulation, and I had only an overheard phone conversation as evidence. Or I could be patient, play the long game, let her think she was winning while I gathered the information I needed to expose her completely. That's when I remembered my sister's youngest daughter, Claire, who worked for the State Department in visa services. Family connections could be remarkably useful when you needed to understand immigration fraud. Aunt Margaret, you're putting me in a very difficult position, Claire said, her voice careful over the phone. We were on a sister lunch date at my favorite cafe, though today I wasn't paying much attention to my salad. I'm not asking you to do anything inappropriate, I said, stirring my iced tea slowly. I just want to understand the general process. Educational purposes. Claire laughed despite herself. Educational purposes. Right. And this has nothing to do with David's mysterious French girlfriend? You always were too smart for your own good. I leaned back in my chair, studying my niece's face. Claire had inherited the family's sharp instincts and no-nonsense attitude. If anyone could help me navigate this situation, it was her. Tell me what you know, she said quietly. Everything. So I did. The overheard phone conversation, the thin social media presence, the convenient backstory that hit all of David's emotional triggers. Claire listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each detail. There are red flags, she admitted when I finished. The timeline is aggressive, the background check seems superficial, and frankly, the whole narrative sounds like something from the manual on marriage fraud indicators. There's a manual? Oh, honey, there are several. Immigration fraud is a cottage industry, and we see variations of this pattern constantly. The difference is usually the sophistication level. Claire pulled out her phone and showed me a government website. Look at this checklist. How many boxes does she tick? As we went through the indicators together, my heart sank. Camille wasn't just suspicious. She was practically a case study in marriage fraud red flags. Rushed timeline, financial motivation, limited verifiable background, age gap that favored the immigrant, and emotional manipulation of the American partner. The thing is, Claire continued, knowing something and proving it are very different challenges. These people are professionals. They've studied American men, they know exactly which buttons to push, and they're very good at covering their tracks. So what would you do? Claire was quiet for a long moment. Officially, I'd advise David to slow down. Do proper due diligence, and insist on meeting her family in France before making any commitments. And unofficially? Unofficially? I'd gather evidence, document everything, and I'd be prepared for the possibility that by the time you have proof, it might be too late to prevent the marriage, but not too late to minimize the damage. The damage. My son's broken heart, his financial losses, his faith in love itself. The ripple effects could last years, maybe decades. Some wounds never fully heal. There's something else you should know, Claire said carefully. If she's doing this professionally, David probably isn't her first target. These operations often work the same territories, use similar methods. There might be other victims, other sons, other families destroyed by Camille's calculated charm. The thought filled me with a cold fury I'd never experienced before. How would I find them? Very carefully, Claire warned, and completely legally. But if there are patterns of behavior, they leave traces. Immigration applications, marriage records, divorce proceedings. It's all public information if you know where to look. By the time we finished lunch, I had a plan. It wasn't a nice plan, and it wasn't a simple plan, but it was thorough. If Camille Dubois was a professional con artist, she was about to discover that Margaret Thompson wasn't nearly as harmless as she appeared. That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to a private investigator Claire had recommended, someone who specialized in background verification with impeccable discretion. The second was to my attorney, updating my will and establishing some additional financial protections that had nothing to do with Camille and everything to do with being prepared for any outcome. The third call was the most important one. David, sweetheart, I've been thinking about what you said, about Camille's parents visiting next month. Yeah? What about it? Well, I'd love to host them for dinner, a proper welcome to the family. And you know what? I think I should brush up on my French before they arrive. Maybe take a refresher course. I'd hate for them to think I wasn't making an effort. The private investigator's name was Marcus Webb, and he looked nothing like what I'd expected. No trench coat or fedora, just a mild-mannered man in his 50s who could have been anyone's accountant, which, as it turned out, was exactly the point. The best investigations happen when nobody realizes they're being investigated, he explained, settling into the chair across from my kitchen table with a manila folder and a cup of coffee. Especially in cases like this, where the subject is already hyper-aware of potential scrutiny. It had been 2 weeks since I'd hired him, and the preliminary results were enlightening in the worst possible way. Let's start with what we know for certain, Marcus said, opening his folder. Camille Dubois entered the United States on a tourist visa 8 months ago. The address she listed on her arrival documents is a short-term rental apartment that she vacated after 6 weeks, right around the time she would have met your son. So she came here specifically to find a husband? It's looking that way. The pattern suggests systematic targeting rather than organic relationship development. He pulled out a series of photographs. These are from her social media activity in the month before she left France. She was researching American dating apps, joining international relationship sites, and participating in forums about American immigration law. The photos showed Camille at her laptop, coffee shops in Paris, always alone, always working on something. Even in candid shots, there was something calculating in her expression. Here's where it gets interesting, Marcus continued. The company she claims to have worked for in Paris? It existed, but it went out of business 3 years ago. The references she provided David are fake. The phone numbers redirect to a voice service that plays pre-recorded messages. My coffee grew cold as Marcus laid out the evidence of Camille's deception. Fabricated employment history, no verifiable address in France for the past 2 years, and most damning of all, a pattern of social media connections that suggested she'd been in contact with other American men before settling on David. There's more, he said quietly. I found evidence of at least 2 previous attempts at marriage-based immigration fraud. Different names, different stories, but the same face and the same methods. He slid 2 more photographs across the table. The first showed Camille with a man in his 40s outside a courthouse in Nevada. The second was from a wedding announcement in a small-town newspaper in Colorado, featuring Marie Fontaine and her American husband. Both marriages lasted less than 2 years. Both ended in divorce with significant financial settlements. Both men are now dealing with debt and emotional trauma, while she disappeared with American citizenship and their assets. I stared at the photographs, feeling sick. David doesn't know? David knows what she's told him, which is a carefully constructed fiction. But Margaret, there's something else you need to understand. This isn't just fraud, it's a criminal enterprise. We're dealing with someone who has destroyed multiple families and shows no signs of stopping. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in around us. What do I do with this information? Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. That depends on what kind of outcome you want. Do you want to save David from making a terrible mistake? Or do you want to ensure Camille faces consequences for what she's already done? Both, I said without hesitation. I want both. Then we need to be very strategic. Moving too fast could spook her into disappearing before David realizes what's happening. Moving too slow means watching the fraud proceed on schedule. Marcus pulled out a timeline chart. She's planning to introduce her parents next week, probably actors hired to play the role. The engagement will happen shortly after that, with a Christmas proposal that gives them just enough time for a New Year's wedding. New Year's? Tax advantages, immigration timing, and emotional manipulation, all wrapped up in romantic symbolism. It's textbook. Marcus closed his folder and looked at me directly. The question is, are you prepared to play a longer game than she is? That evening, I sat in my garden watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere across town, David was probably having dinner with his fraudulent fiancée, discussing wedding plans and dreaming about their future together. And next week, I would sit across from fake parents speaking my rusty French and pretending to believe in a love story that was nothing more than an elaborate con. But Camille Dubois had made one crucial mistake in targeting our family. She'd assumed that a 64-year-old widow would be easy to fool, too polite to question, too grateful for her son's happiness to look too closely at its source. She was about to learn that assumption could be very dangerous indeed. The doorbell rang at precisely 6 o'clock, and I smoothed my dress one final time before answering. Camille stood on my porch, flanked by an elegant older couple who could have been cast by central casting for sophisticated French parents. "Mrs. Thompson," Camille said, her smile bright and seemingly genuine, "I would like you to meet my parents, Henri and Margot Dubois." Henri stepped forward with old-world courtesy, taking my hand and kissing it lightly. "Madame Thompson, we are so honored to meet the mother of the man who has captured our daughter's heart." His French accent was perfect, his mannerisms exactly what you'd expect from a retired teacher from Marseille. Margot embraced me warmly, smelling of expensive perfume and speaking in rapid, enthusiastic French about how wonderful it was to finally meet me. They were good, professional-level good. "Please, come in," I said in my deliberately rusty French. "I apologize for my poor pronunciation. It's been many years since I spoke your beautiful language." The effect was immediate and telling. Camille's eyes flickered with something that might have been concern, while her fake parents exchanged the briefest of glances. They hadn't expected me to speak French at all, let alone catch their authentic accents that were distinctly Parisian rather than Marseille. David arrived as we were settling in the living room, bringing wine and flowers and practically glowing with happiness. "Aren't they wonderful, Mom? I feel like I've gained a whole new family." As the evening progressed, I played my part perfectly. The charmed future in-law, delighted with these lovely people, asking gentle questions about their life in France and expressing how happy I was that David had found such a wonderful woman with such a strong family foundation. But I was also listening, really listening. And what I heard confirmed every suspicion Marcus Webb had raised. Henry's stories about his teaching career were generic and vague, the kind of details anyone could fabricate from internet research. Margot's descriptions of her government work contradicted themselves within the same conversation. Most telling of all, when they spoke to each other in French, thinking I couldn't follow, their casual conversation revealed knowledge and references that belonged to Paris, not Marseille. "Pass the salt, would you?" Margot said in French to Henri. "This American food is so bland." "At least the wine is decent," Henri replied, also in French. "Though I miss proper cheese. These Americans have no palate." Meanwhile, in English, they were praising my cooking and expressing delight at experiencing authentic American hospitality. But the moment that confirmed everything came during coffee service. David had stepped into the kitchen to help me serve dessert when Camille spoke quietly to her fake parents in rapid French. She's harmless, but not stupid. Keep the details consistent and don't get too comfortable. We're almost at the finish line. The son is completely hooked, Henry replied. When do you want to do the proposal timeline? Next week. Christmas Eve engagement, New Year's wedding, emotional timing that makes it hard for anyone to object. They thought they were speaking privately. They thought their secret was safe. They had no idea that the harmless American widow serving them coffee and homemade apple pie understood every calculated word. As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave, Margot took my hands warmly. We are so grateful that our Camille found David, and through him, you. Family is everything. Don't you agree? Oh, absolutely, I said, smiling serenely. Family is the most important thing in the world. We'd do anything to protect the people we love. After they left, David lingered, helping me clean up and bubbling over with excitement about his future in-laws. They're amazing, aren't they? So warm and genuine. I can see where Camille gets her character. They're certainly impressive, I agreed. Very polished. I'm thinking about proposing next week, he said, his voice soft with nervous excitement. Christmas Eve, like in the movies. What do you think? I turned away, ostensibly to load the dishwasher, but really to hide the expression on my face. I think she's a very lucky woman to have found you, sweetheart. What I was really thinking was that Camille Dubois had just made her second crucial mistake. The first was underestimating me. The second was revealing her timeline while I was still in a position to destroy it. Christmas Eve was 8 days away. She had 8 days to believe she was winning. I had 8 days to ensure she lost everything. That night, I called Marcus Webb with 3 words: accelerate the timeline. Marcus Webb arrived at my house the next morning with a briefcase full of evidence and a plan that was both elegant and ruthless. We move tomorrow, he said, spreading documents across my dining room table. Christmas Eve, just before David's planned proposal. Maximum emotional impact, minimum escape opportunities. The evidence was devastating. Bank records showing wire transfers from Camille's previous victims. Immigration documents with 3 different identities. Photographs of her with other men, other families she'd destroyed. Most damning of all, recorded phone conversations between Camille and her real handler. Not fake parents, but a criminal organization that specialized in marriage fraud. She's not just a con artist, Marcus explained. She's part of a network. They identify targets, create backstories, provide supporting actors when needed, and take a percentage of whatever assets they can extract. I studied a photograph of Camille with a man in his 50s outside a courthouse in Miami. The timestamp showed it was from just 18 months ago. How many families has she destroyed? That we can prove? 7. But the pattern suggests more. Marcus pulled out a financial analysis that made my stomach turn. Conservative estimate? She's stolen over $2 million from American men in the past 5 years. $2 million. 7 families. And David was supposed to be number 8. Here's what we're going to do, Marcus continued. Tomorrow evening, when David brings Camille here for Christmas Eve dinner before the proposal, we're going to have some unexpected guests. The plan was perfect in its simplicity. Agent Sarah Chen from Immigration and Customs Enforcement would arrive during dinner, ostensibly for a routine follow-up on Camille's visa status. What she'd actually be doing was arresting Camille for immigration fraud, based on the evidence Marcus had compiled. The timing is crucial, Marcus warned. Too early, and she might run. Too late, and David gets engaged to someone who's about to be arrested. We need to thread the needle perfectly. That afternoon, I went through the motions of Christmas Eve preparation like an actor rehearsing for the performance of her life. Cooking David's favorite meal, setting the table with my grandmother's china, wrapping presents that would never be opened. Every domestic detail felt surreal, knowing what was coming. David called around 4, his voice bright with nervous excitement. "Mom, we'll be there at 6. I'm going to propose after dinner, just like we planned. I've got the ring and everything." The ring. My grandmother's engagement ring, passed down through 3 generations of Thompson women, now about to be offered to a criminal who saw David as nothing more than a paycheck. "That sounds perfect, sweetheart," I managed. "I can't wait to celebrate with you both." At 5:45, my doorbell rang. Agent Chen stood on my porch in professional attire that could pass for dinner party appropriate. She was younger than I'd expected, with kind eyes that turned steely when she discussed Camille's crimes. "We'll wait until after the main course," she said quietly. "Let her get comfortable, think she's safe. Then I'll present my credentials and place her under arrest. What about David? He's going to be hurt and angry, probably at you initially, for not telling him sooner, but he'll understand eventually. The alternative is watching her destroy him financially and emotionally over the next 2 years." At exactly 6 o'clock, David's car pulled into my driveway. Through the window, I watched him take Camille's hand, probably giving her last-minute reassurance about the proposal timing. She looked radiant, confident, completely unaware that her criminal career was about to end in my dining room. "Showtime," Agent Chen said softly. "Mrs. Thompson, dinner smells absolutely wonderful," Camille said as they entered, kissing my cheeks in the French style. She was wearing an elegant red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and she looked every inch the sophisticated European woman about to become an American bride. David was practically vibrating with nervous energy, patting his jacket pocket where the ring box created a telltale bulge. "Mom, I think this might be our best Christmas Eve ever." If only he knew. Agent Chen had positioned herself in the living room, pretending to read a magazine I'd strategically placed there. To David and Camille, she looked like any family friend who'd stopped by for the holidays. "Who's your guest?" David asked, glancing toward the living room. "Oh, that's Sarah, my neighbor's niece," I said smoothly. "She's visiting for the holidays and didn't have anywhere to go tonight. I hope you don't mind that I invited her to join us." Camille's smile never wavered, but I caught the flicker of calculation in her eyes. An unexpected witness to the proposal wasn't ideal, but it wasn't alarming either. Just another detail to manage in her carefully orchestrated evening. Dinner conversation flowed like a well-rehearsed play. David talked about his work, his plans for the new year, his excitement about building a life with Camille. She responded with perfect warmth, asking thoughtful questions and making gentle jokes that had him laughing and falling deeper under her spell with every passing moment. Meanwhile, Agent Chen made small talk about her job in government consulting and complimented Camille's accent, dress, and charming stories about France. To anyone watching, it looked like a lovely family dinner with a delightful addition to the guest list. But I was watching Camille carefully, and as the evening progressed, I noticed subtle changes in her behavior. The way her eyes occasionally darted to Agent Chen when she thought no one was looking. The slight tension in her shoulders when Agent Chen asked casual questions about her background. The almost imperceptible pause before she answered questions about her visa status. Professional criminals develop instincts about law enforcement, and something about Agent Chen was triggering Camille's internal warning system. She couldn't identify the threat yet, but she sensed danger. "This has been lovely," Camille said as we finished the main course, "but perhaps we should think about heading home soon. It's getting late." David looked confused. "But we haven't had dessert yet, and I thought we might exchange gifts." "Of course," Camille said quickly, her smile brightening. "I'm just thinking about the drive home in this weather." There was no weather. It was a clear, calm December evening, but she wanted to leave, and she wanted to leave now. Agent Chen stood up casually. "Actually, before anyone goes anywhere, I should probably introduce myself properly." She pulled out her credentials, her voice taking on official authority. "Agent Sarah Chen, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Ms. Dubois, I need to speak with you about some discrepancies in your visa documentation." The transformation in Camille was instantaneous and chilling. The warm, charming woman vanished, replaced by someone cold and calculating. Her accent disappeared entirely, revealing perfectly American English underneath. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said evenly. "My documentation is completely in order." David was staring back and forth between them, his face a mask of confusion. "What's going on? What discrepancies?" Agent Chen pulled out her phone and showed him the photographs Marcus had compiled. "Mr. Thompson, the woman you know as Camille Dubois is actually named Christina Marsh. She's wanted for immigration fraud, identity theft, and multiple counts of marriage fraud across 7 states. The ring box fell from David's suddenly nerveless fingers, hitting the hardwood floor with a sound like breaking dreams. The silence that followed Agent Chen's revelation lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then David exploded. "What the hell is this?" He spun to face me, his eyes blazing with betrayal and fury. You knew and you didn't tell me?" "David, please let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been investigating the woman I love behind my back? That you've been lying to me for weeks?" His voice cracked with pain. "I trusted you, Mom. I brought her here because I trusted your judgment, and this is what you do?" Camille, Christina, whoever she really was, had gone very still, her mind clearly racing through options and escape routes. But Agent Chen was positioned between her and the front door, and backup officers were already surrounding the house. "Mr. Thompson," Agent Chen said gently, "I know this is shocking, but your mother likely saved you from years of financial and emotional devastation. The woman you know as Camille has defrauded 7 other men out of nearly $2 million. David shook his head violently. "No, you're wrong. This is some kind of mistake. Camille isn't... She wouldn't..." He turned to her desperately. "Tell them they're wrong. Tell them this is all some horrible mix-up." For a moment, I thought she might keep up the charade, try one final manipulation to maintain her hold on David's emotions. But then she looked at the evidence spread across Agent Chen's phone, calculated the odds, and made a different choice. She laughed. It was a cold, amused sound that had nothing of Camille's musical French accent. When she spoke, her voice was flat, American, and utterly without remorse. "Oh, David, you poor, sweet, stupid man." She picked up her wineglass and took a sip, as if she were discussing the weather. "Did you really think someone like me would fall for someone like you without an ulterior motive?" David went white. "What? You're boring, David. Predictable. The kind of man who thinks buying flowers and opening doors makes him irresistible to sophisticated European women." She gestured dismissively. "I've played this role so many times I could do it in my sleep. Vulnerable foreign girl, charmed by American stability, grateful for protection and security. It works every single time." The cruelty was breathtaking. She wasn't just confessing, she was destroying him for sport. The accent, the stories about France, the whole romantic narrative, all of it was research and performance. "I spent 3 weeks studying your social media, your interests, your psychological profile before I ever approached you at that coffee shop." She smiled coldly. "Did you think it was coincidence that I was reading your favorite book when we met?" David sat down heavily, like his legs could no longer support him. "The book? You said it was recommended by a friend. Amazon reviews and customer purchase patterns. I bought 5 books I knew would appeal to lonely divorced men in their 30s looking for intellectual connection." She shrugged. "Yours was the easiest mark in the coffee shop that day." Agent Chen moved closer, handcuffs ready. "Christina Marsh, you're under arrest for immigration fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit marriage fraud." But Christina wasn't done with her performance. She looked directly at me, her eyes filled with genuine hatred. "You think you've won something, old woman? You've destroyed your relationship with your son to stop something that was always going to end anyway. I would have divorced him in 2 years, taken my cut, and disappeared. Now he'll spend the rest of his life wondering if every woman who shows interest in him is just another con artist." She turned back to David, who was staring at her like she was a stranger, which, of course, she was. "Your mother didn't save you, David. She just ensured that you'll never trust love again." Agent Chen led Christina away in handcuffs, but not before one final revelation that changed everything I thought I understood about the situation. "Wait!" Christina called out as they reached the front door. "Don't you want to know about the real Camille Dubois?" Agent Chen paused. "What about her?" Christina's smile was vicious. "She's real. 28 years old, lives in Marseille with her parents, works in hotel management just like I claimed. I studied her social media for months, stole her identity piece by piece, built my cover story around her actual life. My blood went cold." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there's a real woman in France who has no idea her identity was stolen, who might be getting visits from American immigration officials asking questions about her fictional boyfriend and his family." Christina's eyes glittered with malice. "I'm saying your investigation might have just destroyed an innocent person's life along with your son's." The front door closed behind them, leaving David and me alone in the wreckage of Christmas Eve dinner. He sat motionless at the dining room table, staring at the scattered evidence of his shattered fairy tale. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. "What she said about the real Camille?" I sank into the chair across from him, suddenly feeling every one of my 64 years. "I don't know. Marcus, the investigator I hired, he'll have to look into it." "Marcus." David's voice was flat. "How long have you known?" 3 weeks, since the night she called me an ugly cow in French, thinking I couldn't understand her. For the first time since Agent Chen had revealed the truth, David looked directly at me. "She called you what?" "She was on the phone with someone, speaking French, explaining how she was going to manipulate you into marriage and then divorce you for money and citizenship. I heard everything." David was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was a bitter sound, but not entirely humorless. "An ugly cow. That's actually pretty accurate considering how she played me." "David, no, she's right about one thing. I don't know if I'll ever trust anyone again." He stood up, moving to the window where he could see Agent Chen's car driving away. 3 weeks, Mom. You knew for 3 weeks that the woman I loved was planning to destroy my life, and you didn't tell me. You wouldn't have believed me. Maybe not, but you could have tried. He turned back to me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Disappointment so deep it looked like grief. "Instead, you orchestrated this whole evening. Let me make a fool of myself. Let me get excited about proposing. Let me bring her into our family home for one final performance before you brought it all crashing down." He was right, and we both knew it. I could have handled this differently. Found a way to warn him, to protect him from the public humiliation of being arrested in front of the woman who'd been systematically destroying his life. "I was trying to protect you," I said weakly, "by lying to me, by investigating behind my back, by treating me like I was too stupid to handle the truth." David picked up the ring box from the floor, staring at it like it was something toxic. This was Grandma's ring. Yes, she would have worn it, taken it with her when she divorced me. Grandma's ring would have ended up in some pawn shop or sold online to fund her next con. The thought hadn't occurred to me, but it hit like a physical blow. 4 generations of family history reduced to criminal profit. David pocketed the ring box and headed for the door. "I need some time to process this." "David, wait. I love you, Mom, but I can't be around you right now. Every time I look at you, I'm going to think about how you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth." The door closed quietly behind him, leaving me alone with the remains of Christmas Eve dinner and the weight of choices that had been both completely right and utterly devastating. But Christina had made one final mistake in her parting shot. She'd revealed the existence of the real Camille Dubois, which meant there was still one more chapter to this story. One more chance to find something redemptive in the wreckage. That night, I called Marcus Webb with new instructions. Find the real Camille and find out how to make this right. 2 months later, I was standing in the International Arrivals Terminal at Austin Bergstrom International Airport, holding a sign with Camille Dubois written in my best handwriting. The real Camille Dubois was exactly as Christina had described her. 28, petite, with the kind of effortless French style that can't be faked. But where Christina had been calculating and cold underneath her charm, the real Camille radiated genuine warmth. "Mrs. Thompson?" she asked in accented English. Approaching cautiously. "I am Camille. The real one, I think." I couldn't help smiling. "Yes, you're definitely the real one. Thank you for coming." What had started as damage control had evolved into something much more meaningful. Marcus's investigation had revealed that Christina's identity theft had indeed caused problems for the real Camille. French authorities had questioned her about her fictional American boyfriend. Her bank accounts had been frozen pending investigation, and her reputation in her small community had been damaged by association with international fraud. But more than that, we'd discovered that Camille was dealing with her own family crisis. Her mother was battling cancer, and the medical bills were threatening to bankrupt the family. The money I'd offered to bring her to Austin for a face-to-face explanation had been gratefully accepted as a chance to earn additional income during a desperate time. "I still don't understand," Camille said as we walked toward my car. "Why would someone pretend to be me? My life is not so interesting." "It was perfect for her purposes," I explained. "Real enough to be verifiable, ordinary enough not to raise suspicions. She studied your social media, learned about your work, your family, your interests, and then used all of that to create a cover story. Over the next 3 days, I got to know the woman my son should have met instead of the criminal who had nearly destroyed his life. Camille was funny, intelligent, and refreshingly honest about her own struggles and dreams. She was also nursing a broken heart, a relationship that had ended badly 6 months earlier with a man who'd been cheating on her with her best friend. "It is strange," she said on her second evening, as we sat in my garden sharing a bottle of wine. "This woman, she stole my name, my history, even my heartbreak to make her story more believable. It feels like being robbed of yourself." "I'm sorry," I said. "If I had known there was a real person behind the identity." "You would have done the same thing," Camille said firmly. "You protected your son. That is what mothers do." David had agreed to meet her on her final day in Austin. He was still barely speaking to me, but his curiosity about the real person behind Christina's lies had eventually overcome his anger. They met at the same coffee shop where Christina had first approached him, a detail that I found both poetic and slightly heartbreaking. I watched from across the street as they talked for nearly 2 hours, their body language shifting from awkward formality to genuine interest. When David brought her back to the house afterward, something had changed in both of them. "She's nothing like her," he said quietly to me while Camille was in the bathroom. Everything that felt artificial about Christina, the 2 perfect answers, the way she always said exactly what I wanted to hear. Camille is the opposite. She's real. What does that mean? It means I'm going to drive her to the airport tomorrow, and then I'm going to think very carefully about what I want to do next. What David decided to do next was surprising to everyone, including himself. 3 weeks after Camille returned to France, he booked a flight to Marseille. Not for romance, he insisted, but to see for himself the life Christina had stolen and twisted into her fictional narrative. He came back 2 weeks later with a new perspective on trust, love, and the difference between falling for a fantasy and connecting with a real person. "I'm not ready for anything serious," he told me over dinner at my house, the first meal we'd shared since Christmas Eve. "But Camille and I are going to stay in touch. Maybe visit back and forth, see what develops naturally." "And us?" I asked. "Are we okay?" David was quiet for a moment. "You were right to investigate her. You were right to stop the fraud. But you were wrong not to trust me with the truth. If we're going to rebuild our relationship, it has to be based on honesty. Even when honesty is difficult." "I understand." "Do you? Because if Camille and I do develop something real, if she eventually moves here or I move there, I need to know you'll respect our choices, even if you disagree with them." "I promise," I said, and meant it. 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation written in elegant French script. David and Camille had decided to marry in a small ceremony in Provence, surrounded by olive groves and the kind of authentic French countryside that Christina had only pretended to know. As I RSVP'd yes with excitement, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us all here. Sometimes the worst deceptions lead to the most honest connections. Sometimes protecting someone means letting them make their own mistakes. And sometimes, when you think you're saving one story, you're actually beginning a completely different one. The real Camille Dubois was nothing like her imposter, and that turned out to be exactly what my son needed to learn to trust love again. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.